One of my favorite pieces of art advice that I ever got came immediately after a professor looked at some of my art and said, "You know, it kinda looks like you don't know what you're doing." And his advice had to do with drawing cartoon styles, but maybe not in a way you'd expect. I'll get to it in a sec, but the point is this episode's gonna be a lot of cartoon drawings. So let's roll the opening banner and intro the episode. A few episodes ago, I talked about how detailed your art should be depending on the kind of project you're working on, and how video game characters, a lot of the time, will be much more detailed than characters designed for comics or 2D animated TV shows. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to take some characters from some video games with some very detailed designs and draw them in a style that would work better for something like an animated show. Which means less rendering, less detail, while still trying to get the character to look like themselves. I thought it'd be a fun challenge, and a good way to force me to focus on some of the simple essentials of good character art. So without further ado, let's get into the first drawing. Alright, so we're gonna start with Wraith from Apex Legends, who's a character I really love. I haven't drawn her in ages. I drew her on the channel a while back, and I also haven't played the game in ages, but I really like the game. And I'm gonna draw her in a medium-ish cartoon style. I'm gonna use 2 layers of cell shading, and I've drawn this piece already. I like how it ends up turning out. But as I was saying earlier, the thing that prompted this video was that advice I got after the professor said it looked like I didn't know what I was doing with my art. He suggested I try drawing in a cartoonier style. Not because cartoons are easier to draw, but because when you're drawing in a cartoonier style, doing something like cel-shaded shadows and lighting, you have to be very decisive with every decision you make, and it forces you to think more about your fundamentals. If you start working with lots of detail, you can get too bogged down with drawing a not-so-great character and doing a bunch of intense shadowing and lighting and cross-hatching and just tons of detail on top of a character that doesn't look so great in the first place. So even if you do really nice detailing, all of that's being done on a mediocre character and the piece won't end up looking great. Learning how to do lots of intense detailing before you know your fundamentals is kind of like learning how to make icing before you know how to make cake. Which isn't necessarily a perfect analogy because I'm someone that could eat a whole bucket of icing without any cake at all, but you get what I mean. Especially with something like cel-shaded shadows, you have to very much decide, okay, the lights are here and the shadow is here. Which again, isn't realistic, it's what kind of makes something like this look cartoony, but it really helps with your decision making as an artist, and can help you do less cartoony art in the future. Anyway, here's what my cartoonified Wraith turned out like. Next up, we've got Vi from League of Legends, and I've never really been any good at League of Legends, but I love all of the character designs in the game. They're so cool looking, and Vi is one of my personal favorites. I love the short pink hair, goggles, gigantic fists. I mean, as someone who draws a lot of cartoony style art, I really like big hands, so having an excuse to give a character really big hands and fists was just really nice for me to work with. But it was really hard deciding what parts of this character were essential to her design. I mean, luckily the hair and fists are pretty distinct, so even if I'd just done a very simplified version of the character, as long as she's got those things, it'll probably come across to anyone that knows her. But I really had to think about this one, and I think I did a good job coming out with the things that really matter about the character. I made the fists big and a bit of detailing on them. I put that sort of clock thing on them, I'm not sure what it is, but then I gave them the same kind of colors she's got, but really simplified just the mechanics of the fists, and I think this one turns out really nice. It's a bit of a boring pose. I did that because I wanted to focus more on the design of the character than doing an action-y sort of piece, and I think that works well. I also, thinking about the doing simplified artwork, I only do 1 layer of cel-shaded shadows, and that's it. I do a little bit of fading on some of it, but I just stick with 1 layer of shadows, and I really like how this one turns out. Probably one of my favorites of the batch today. So I hope you all like it too. Here's Vi as a cartoon character. Next up, we've got Reaper from Overwatch. And Reaper admittedly isn't even a character I really played that much when I played Overwatch, but I just love his design so much. He's so cool looking. He's super tough, but also I don't know, Overwatch characters just have that thing about them. They're kind of cartoonish already, but also very detailed, and I just love the designs in that game. And for this one, I knew I wanted to do one, if not more, Overwatch characters for this episode, because their silhouettes are so great, and I feel like they could transition really easily into cartoon characters. And this one I end up drawing a little bit like a Young Justice style character a little bit. I draw him in my usual style proportions. I don't exaggerate anything too much. Make his hands and feet a little bit bigger than they would normally be. I might actually make his shoulders smaller than they are in the game. He's got pretty big, broad shoulders. But in terms of the simplifying, I really like what I did with this one. I did it a little bit more fast and loose. I did one layer of rough drawing instead of 2 layers as I normally do, and kind of just whipped out the ink a little bit more. I tried to be a little bit more confident with my strokes, which is something I've been doing more in my work lately, or at least trying to do in my work. And I think it helps this piece look decently fluid. But in terms of the design, I really like that there were lots of places where he had kind of textured, beveled, just padding and armor, and I could just soften that down and simplify it into one long pattern. Like on his stomach, I gave him sort of abs-ish instead of having his actual, he's got some beveled padding there, and his leg armor, I just smooth it out. Besides that, I also really like the pose, and I think it's got some good perspective to it, and the guns turned out better than I thought they would. I had to, of course, simplify them back into just sort of blocks with a few extra details on them, but I think it works well in the context of this cartoonier drawing of Reaper. So let's take a look at how this one turned out. Next up, we've got Kait Diaz from Gears of War, I think 4 and 5. I think she's the main character of Gears 5. I used to love Gears of War, but I have a PS4 now, so I haven't been able to play any of the more recent Gears of War games. But I really like the look of this character, and I really wanted to take this one on as a challenge to really simplify the design. So I was thinking a little bit in line with something like a Bruce Timm animation style. He's the guy that designed the characters for the Batman animated series, Justice League animated series, that sort of boxy kind of look, but this was a female character, so a little bit narrower-ish shoulders, but also because it's a Gears character, she's still pretty bulky and tough looking. This one, I think, definitely ends up looking most like it's out of an animated series or something like that. I really strip back the details, and I think it really ends up working in this piece. I think I keep enough of her essential design elements, those circles on her chest that I'm sure they have some kind of tactical purpose, but I don't know what it is. The extra, I don't really render them out as fluffy, but those extra bits of padding from her, it looks like this is a kind of winter coat armor sort of thing. Again, I haven't played the game, so I'm not totally sure. I think I might make her outfit a little bit too bright blue because it's a pretty dark, gritty, gray palette kind of game, and I make that blue very vibrant on this one. But I think it still comes across as the character it's supposed to be, and overall I'm really happy with how it turned out. So here's how Kait Diaz looks as a cartoon character. Now this was easily the trickiest one of the batch because it's a character that just has so much detail. It's Thunderjaw from Horizon Zero Dawn. Again, this is another game that I haven't actually played, but I just love the designs for the game so much. They're so cool looking. These mech dinosaur animal things are just, they're so cool. I don't know who is doing designs for this game, but they're a genius. And this was actually good practice for a bunch of people have been requesting that I do a Transformers style episode where I either draw superheroes as Transformers or just something with Transformers, and I do plan on doing that. And this was kind of good practice for that. But because the character's so detailed, I really had to think about what elements are essential. And of course the main part is just the shape of the character, which I think I pretty much nailed. I made the feet bigger, both because that's kind of a cartoony thing to do, and because I just personally like when a dinosaur T-Rex type character has bigger feet. I think it makes them look a little bit more firmly planted and balanced. And I really like the pose that I ended up doing for this one. I thought about just doing a pose similar to the reference images I had, but I really like how this one turns out. You can see the character's whole kind of body, but I struggled a lot with figuring out the head because there's so many different things going on Thunderjaw's head. He's got these extra things kind of sticking out the side. It's like a mouth that opens like this, sort of. So I had to think of all the different pieces that are there. There are the bigger pieces on the side, and then there's some smaller bits inside that look like they've got sort of spike teeth to them. Then the red dots that are kind of like its eyes. Then it's also got these sort of machine gun looking things on the side of its head. And then there's what I assume are kind of bullet belts going from its head to its body. Overall, I think I do a really good job with it. It just took way more time than the other ones. I think I spent something like 2.5 hours on this drawing. Even though it's something that turns out very cartoon looking, it still took a long time because there was a lot of things that I had to decide on. I don't know that it was necessarily worth the time I spent on it, but I do think this is pretty cool looking, and I think it's definitely a good representation of the Thunderjaw from the game. So here it is, Cartoon Thunderjaw. Next up, we've got Kratos from God of War, and I specifically went with the most recent God of War game because I just love that axe that he's got in that game. It comes any kind of weapon that a character throws and it comes back to them is just the coolest thing to me. I mean, Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer, even Daredevil's baton things often come back to him. All those kinds of weapons are super cool, and they nailed that sort of the feel that it should have in the making of this game. But anyway, Kratos' design is already pretty simple. I mean, he's very textured and detailed in that way, but his actual design isn't anything that complicated. He's got a loincloth, he's got like padding on his arms, and then he's got one shoulder padding, his beard, and then his red streaks. So this one I decided to go much more cartoony with it. I was thinking something along the lines of Spectacular Spider-Man style, and I think it works pretty well with this character. It also meant there was a lot less thought going into this one. I didn't really have to think about where to strip things back because it kind of just came naturally. I just detailed some areas a little bit less than they should be. I don't know if I love how this pose turned out. I probably should have spent a little bit more time on it, seeing as how this video is about me focusing more on the fundamentals and less on the rendering and details. I don't mind it. It just looks a little bit off balance. But anyway, besides that, you can see what I'm doing with this one. I use a textured brush for the cell shading just to give his skin a little bit more texture to it. But besides that, just basic line work, one layer of cell shaded shadows, one layer of cell shaded lights, and we wrap up our Kratos as a cartoon character. Now I know I've already done an Overwatch character with Reaper, but I felt like I had to draw Pharah. She's one of my favorite video game characters. She was my go-to character to play as when I played Overwatch more, and she's just such a cool design. It's like an even more awesome Iron Man suit design. I mean, that's depending on what Iron Man suit you're looking at. It's just, I've always dug this design, and I wanted to think about how I could strip back the details and still have the important stuff come across. I think this is one of the less successful drawings. I think I do a good job deciding what elements are essential to the character, just not a great job with the rendering on this one. What I end up doing is making the line work very simple and making the suit very simple, and then doing something a little more close to what my usual rendering is, where I do 2 layers of cell shaded shadows, 1 layer of that lightly stroked in lighting, and then a little bit of rim lighting as well. So this one's more detailed in terms of the rendering than some of the other ones, which kind of makes it not fit in so well with this video. But I drew it. I debated not putting it in the video, but you know, always good to have the video be a bit longer, and I do kind of like how it turned out, just not as much as some of the others in the batch. So anyway, don't need to spend as long talking about this one. Here is the final drawing of Pharah. Alright, I think focusing on my fundamentals was a really good way to do a bit of a mental reset, and I think my next few videos are going to be much better for having done this. And of course, I'll do a lot more rendering in my next videos. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you've got suggestions for mashup drawings or cool stuff as other cool stuff videos, leave them in the comments below. I've got lots of other videos like this where I take something and turn it into something else, like Disney princesses as Sith Lords, Avengers characters as My Hero Academia characters, Pokemon as superheroes, that's probably the most popular series, and lots more, so be sure to check those out. I'm Christian Pearson, this has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.